Story 1. I had a classmate in grade school. She didn't have many friends, and she struggled academically. In 5th grade, the nun teaching the class brought her to the board to solve a problem she didn't understand. The nun humiliated her in front of the class until she began crying. My dad was a surgeon and ended up operating on her after her appendix burst, as she had not received treatment for days. He suspected that, at best, she was being neglected at home, and at worst, she was being abused. Story 2. My parents' difficult divorce was only overshadowed by their troubled marriage. At 7, I was taken from what was bad but familiar into something completely unfamiliar when my mother left my father and moved us across the country. I was a complete mess due to this upheaval, and it was the 1970s when children treated the weak and vulnerable very differently. If I allowed myself to think about the things that hurt me, I would start screaming and never stop. Story 3. I recently found my diary from ages 9 to 11, and reading my younger self's attempts to understand why my mom was gone is very sad. As an adult now, I know she left the family because she was a drug addict. I am 36 now, and she never overcame her struggles. She is still out there somewhere, dealing with addiction. Story 4. I recently saw some childhood photos. I looked like a happy kid, but I remember how many intense thoughts of self-hatred I had. From my current perspective, seeing a normal kid like that and knowing they had such thoughts swirling inside all the time made me quite sad. Story 5. How intolerant my parents were of childlike mistakes. They told me I would understand when I got older. I began to see them as bad people. Rational adults understand that children are just children, not fully formed humans. They make mistakes. Hitting and yelling are inappropriate in most situations involving children. Story 6. I don't understand why everyone disliked me. My teachers, the kids, and even my dad told me a babysitter disliked me when I was a baby. She was great to my brothers but did not like me. Story 7. I still remember sleeping over at a friend's house and discovering that mothers show love to their children. I had a challenging childhood in many ways, but I recall that awakening as one of the most depressing events of my life. Story 8. My father's schizophrenia prevented him from attending any of my events, including my high school graduation. He is now receiving treatment and is more involved, but I am always reminded that I need to be present for my children, not just with money or words, but through my actions and time. Story 9. The death of my sister shattered my family, leading to my parents' divorce and my brother leaving home. I haven't spoken with my brother in over 12 years, and it still hurts to this day. I was 7 when this all happened. Story 10. One of my family members said they were embarrassed to be seen in public with me because I am chubby. I was 12. Story 11. I had a childhood dog who was a family pet but was mostly mine. He would sleep in my bed every night. He had cancer and was getting older, so my parents decided not to spend the money to treat him. He was becoming immobile, and they had a plan to have one of their friends put him to sleep, but didn't quite know when. I remember coming home from work one day, and as soon as I walked in the door, my mom told me he had passed away. I was heartbroken and didn't even go to his little memorial with the rest of my family. I stayed in bed for 2 days. This was 11 years ago, and I just found out 2 years ago that they didn't actually take him. He died on his own. The worst part is that the night before he passed, I was trying to sleep, but he kept me awake all night because he was groaning on my bed, and I was really frustrated with him. I miss him. Story 12. Realizing that my older sister, who endured the majority of the abuse, was just a child herself. She seemed much older than she was at the time. Story 13. The fact that my childhood is gone and all the things that adults told us about enjoying the time you have while young didn't really mean much to us. Story 14. My dad used to work in the military, specifically on a boat, and for Christmas we had a family day with military families. I think my mom, who was always terrible with dates, forgot, so my dad ended up being there alone. It still quietly haunts me hearing that argument. Story 15. When I was a child, I found some kittens on the side of the road, and my family decided to take them to the local animal shelter. While at the shelter, as the adults were handling the paperwork, I was allowed to explore and look at the animals. While observing them, I came across an unlocked shed. I went inside and saw a golden retriever lying on the floor, sleeping. There was also a cat and a bunny in there, both sleeping. I lay down on the ground and snuggled with the dog. That was when I discovered that the animals were not sleeping. They were dead. I stumbled upon where they keep the animals after they are euthanized. Thinking about being a 6-year-old child lying on the ground snuggling with dead animals still breaks my heart. Story 16. The way I was raised has a profound impact on how I parent my daughter. I cannot imagine treating her the way I was treated as a child. Just thinking about the things my parents did to me makes me feel heartbroken even now. Story 17. I have struggled with self-doubt and have been highly critical of myself. Recently, I found a box of camcorder tapes from my childhood and watched my mom expressing frustration with me from a young age, even getting upset on my second birthday for wanting cake. I am realizing that my mom was likely always mildly irritated with my normal childhood needs. This honestly explains a lot about why I feel I am never good enough as an adult. Story 18. How much pain, sadness, and self-hatred I felt as a child. My parents had me in high school, and my father was always abusive, but they persisted for the sake of the family. I ran away frequently, harmed myself, and distanced myself from my peers without understanding why I felt this way. My world was dark, scary, and loud, and I blamed myself for them staying together. If only my mother hadn't gotten pregnant, maybe she could have escaped. If only they had remained separated when I was young. If my mother hadn't returned out of fear of how my father would treat me. It took me a long time to let go of all that. Now, I am a happy person with a partner of my own. If only that little girl could have seen that things get better and that I would have the life I always dreamed of, because I was determined not to continue the cycle. Story 19. Realizing that adults were willing to let me, a 12-year-old, endure horrific bullying and abuse at school, because I did not believe the same things they did and deserved it. Even when my classmate attempted to harm me, they turned a blind eye. It is a miracle I never walked into traffic. Story 20. Finding out that your childhood friends, whom you thought would be friends for life, fade away as you get older. Story 21. The main memory I have is watching a girl named Samantha get bullied to tears. I recall the event that led to my expulsion from school. Samantha's mom was in the classroom when someone threw a hard-covered book at Samantha's face. She ran out of the classroom crying hysterically. In a moment of anger, I threw a chair at the person and injured him. I'm not usually one for violence, but that situation affected me deeply. The positive outcome was that no one bullied her anymore. Story 22. Seeing mom and dad fighting gave me their generational trauma. My dad hit me just because my opinion didn't match his. Story 23. My sisters and I were told we were going to get new school clothes, choose them ourselves, and then my mom pretended to pay for them or put them on layaway, but she never actually purchased them. She was poor and often lied to us, giving us false hope. I would have preferred her to be honest with us. There was also the time she made me drive home while she was drunk after visiting a friend's house. I was 12, couldn't even reach the pedals, had never driven before, and was terrified. She was, and still is, a terrible mother. It honestly breaks my heart knowing I went through so much hardship like that all the time, and I really didn't understand how horrible it was until I started unpacking it all in therapy. Story 24. Sitting on a tree branch with my little brother. I was 9 and he was 7. He asked me if the fighting and yelling would ever stop. Story 25. When a small kitten followed us back home, my grandma wouldn't let us take it in. I hope it found someone to take care of it. Story 26. My mother took on a parental role with me. She told me that my father did not want any more children after my brother was born, but she wanted a daughter and insisted that he go along with it. My mother mentally abused me throughout my childhood. She was not supportive of other girls, so her behavior was rooted in jealousy and control. I remember her telling me that I couldn't paint my toenails red because it would imply that I was promiscuous. I felt like the family's scapegoat. Story 27. Realizing that my mother lied about my father cheating on her when she was the one who actually cheated and did nothing when her affair partner, her second husband, abused me, sometimes right in front of her. Story 28. My classmates bullied and belittled me. which shattered my confidence. I became very risk-averse during my prime years, and now I am struggling in every aspect of life. Story 29. I experienced being given alcohol by a much older aunt-in-law, and I was then assaulted by her. Now, later in life, it feels as though nobody cares because I should have been grateful for having had sexual experiences as a young male. Story 30. The first time my teacher scolded me was because I brought the wrong food for the class. That was when I was about 3 or 4 years old. Story 31. Sitting at the top of the stairs, I heard my parents arguing over money late at night when all I wanted was a hug because I had a bad dream. Story 32. I'm okay now, but my heart breaks for the little girl I once was, who was told by my mom that she didn't have enough money to terminate the pregnancy. The only reason I was born is that her suicide attempt didn't work when she found out she was pregnant. She blamed me for being born. No matter what I did, it was never good enough. Story 33. I used to make my mom all kinds of art projects at school from 2nd to 4th grade, only to find out she threw them in the basement in boxes labeled as trash. My heart was crushed. I'm in my early 40s now. My dad recently gave me back every report card I had from 7th to 12th grade, as well as art projects I made for him when I was 3. My mom hated me so much. Story 34. My mother's new husband did not like dogs, so she took my dog to the animal shelter. She claimed there was a kind farmer who wanted a dog and that she was running around on the farm. Story 35. I was 5 years old, and my mom's car was in the shop. She drove my dad to work but had to pick him up late because she had to stay late. She didn't want to wake me, and it was only about 5 or 6 minutes. I must have heard her leave and woke up. I found myself alone outside, roaming the neighborhood and crying. I have been terrified of being abandoned ever since. Story 36. My brother and I were raised by a single father. Our mother had visitation rights every other weekend. She often failed to show up to intentionally disrupt my father's schedule. This was the time before cell phones, so my brother and I would have to hope that when our mother called ahead, she was really on her way to get us, even though she lived at least 40 minutes away. I still feel sad thinking about being a hopeful kid with a weekend bag packed, sitting in the front yard, waiting to see my mother, only for her to never arrive. My father often says what still breaks his heart is how he would take us for ice cream to cheer us up when it was obvious she wasn't coming. My brother and I would still leave a note on the front door, pleading for her to stay in case she did decide to come and get us, assuring her we would be home soon. Also, I remember that episode of Beast Wars where Dinobot died. Story 37. When I won first runner-up in a 5th grade speech writing contest, the girl who won everything took first place. In hindsight, my speech was good but not worthy of first place, even for a 5th grader. I was upset and accepted the small pin, breaking the poor quality pencil that came with it. Story 38. Knowing my mom struggled with addiction and depression and was unable to get clean for my siblings and me. She took her own life in front of me when I was 8. The similarities between her and me are somewhat terrifying, but I am still trying. Story 39. This thread is quite depressing. I am sorry for all of your difficult experiences and memories. If you can afford therapy, go for it. If you cannot, consider reading self-help books. Story 40. Not really heartbreaking, but I was once accused of smashing a window by throwing a rock and was told that they had seen it and knew I had done it. I still denied it but broke down crying at the same time. Then suddenly, they believed me. I did not understand it at the time, but that was some kind of manipulative interrogation you might see by unethical police officers in movies. As an adult now, I can't imagine using that kind of tactic against an innocent child. I did not break that window. Story 41. This feels small compared to some of the other responses, but the year all my extended family forgot to get me Christmas presents while remembering everyone else and the new step-cousins, I was about 10 to 12 years old. I remember walking to the bathroom to cry in private because I didn't want to bother anyone. Story 42. My childhood dogs protected me whenever my physically abusive mother went on a daily drinking rampage. They would scratch and bite her while she was hurting me. One day, I came home from kindergarten and they were both gone. Jack and Toddy, you were the best dogs. And I hope you found a loving home and weren't abandoned in the wild. I still cry for you, I'm in my 30s. Story 43. This is dark, but if you've never heard of my friend, here's a short video that explains my answer to this question. Story 44. I grew up in a small town in the southeast United States. Like many towns in the region, we had wealthy people and those who were impoverished. Some of the impoverished individuals were truly suffering. One particular memory is of a dilapidated shack by the side of the highway, which we passed every day on our way to and from school. I always wondered who lived in that shack and if they had enough food. Did they even have electricity? I could see that their heating source was a wood-burning fireplace, as the entire yard was filled with a chaotic pile of wood. Then, one day as we drove by, I saw one of the residents. It was a classmate of mine. I knew he was struggling by the appearance of his clothes at school. It broke my heart to realize that not only was he poor, but he lived in that house. Story 45. My dad passed away at 37, and I was only 5 when he went into a coma and then died. I'll never know his laugh or hugs. I'll never know what foods he liked or disliked or what music he loved. I was not allowed to talk about it when I was younger, but I have a significant void in my soul. I am 33, and it hurts now more than ever. Story 46. Seeing the Twin Towers fall on September 11th and knowing I had stood on top of both in August 2000 during my first and only trip to New York City is striking. I remembered how many people were working there and how strong and sturdy the towers felt. It's strange because I specifically chose New York City and wanted to see the tops of the major skyscrapers. I didn't realize it would be a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Story 47. When I was 6, we were visiting our mom, who struggled with addiction. We were foster children, but she had the right to see us for a day every 2 weeks. My brother and I found her hanging from the ceiling by the neck. Story 48. My mom told me that if I had never been born, she could have had the life she wanted and deserved. It has been over 20 years since she said that to me, and it still hurts. Story 49. I overheard my mom talking with a friend, saying, "They say she doesn't have the body for dance." I love to dance, and ballet was a favorite after-school activity. I quit around age 12. I later discovered that it was a discussion about my older sister. I still love to dance, but I wish I had done more of it as a young teen. Story 50. Finding out I was conceived through assault and discovering my biological father's identity and history has been a heavy burden. I feel as though I was born carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders, and I have borne it heavily since childhood. Story 51. My parents split when I was 9. My mom had a series of boyfriends and husbands who were abusive to her. I witnessed her with a gun to her head and saw her get beaten severely. I wanted to live with my dad, but his wife had 5 children, and they had no room for another. I entered puberty feeling depressed and came out with abandonment issues and a chip on my shoulder. It was the 1970s and no one understood childhood trauma, talked about it, or helped children cope. As a member of Generation X, it was about toughing it out and moving on. This experience left me with lasting mental and emotional scars. My mom eventually found a good man, and life improved. I worked through the heartbreak and pain, but it took decades. Story 52. The death of my grandmother when I was 10 was a significant moment in my life. She was my best friend. I was introverted and cerebral, and so was she, so I spent as much time as possible at her house. My grandmother was brilliant, poised, well-educated, well-traveled, a celebrated elementary school teacher, and a savvy businesswoman. She understood children and what made us thrive, so even in retirement, she created a fun after-school program in her home during the mid-1960s. My grandmother never told anyone she wasn't well. Then, one day she collapsed in front of me, and I had to hold it together while my younger brothers were hysterical as she was wheeled out on a stretcher and rushed to the hospital. I never saw her alive again. My world went dim. Story 53. At school, there were small prizes for various achievements such as being well-behaved, winning spelling tests, or being the first to pack up. I had never won one. The prizes included really cool erasers and stickers, and one time, I actually won a sparkly pen. I was incredibly happy and excited. However, the next day, I couldn't find it and eventually discovered that my dad had taken it apart, and was using the pen to snort cocaine. I felt a deep emotional pain. Story 54. My dad died when I was 13, and my sister was 8, leaving us with a narcissistic mother. Grieving a dead parent while also grieving a living parent is torture. I don't know what it's like to want your mom. As an adult with 2 kids, ages 9 and 5, the thought of them losing either of us crushes me. My kids would be devastated. It's a heartbreak I don't wish on anyone. Losing a parent at such a young age is a terrible thing, and I wish more people understood that. It affects me to this day. I admit I envy people who had loving parents and saw them grow up and hit all their milestones. I wish my kids knew their grandfather. He would have adored them. Story 55. Simon Birch made me cry the first time I watched it at the age of 12, and it still makes me cry to this day. Story 56. Relatives who were supposed to be close did not love me and did not show any affection. As a child, I did not understand what was happening. Now that I am grown, I feel sorry for that sad version of myself in childhood. Story 57. When I was 5 years old, I was bullied and beaten up by a group of boys in my class. I moved to a new school, and my mother told me I would make new friends. I teared up and asked her, "Wait, I get to have friends?" It broke her heart. As a father of a 5-year-old now, the thought of her being bullied and coming home to say something like that to me absolutely crushes me. Story 58. On the first day of kindergarten, some first graders sitting at a round table wouldn't let me play with dinosaurs. While I was watching them, someone accidentally knocked the table, causing some of the toys to fall over. One child made me cry by yelling at me and blaming me for the incident. I was just trying to make friends, so I started crying, and the teacher came running over to me. 2 of them bullied me for about 4 years after that. However, after I had a fight and bloodied the noses of 2 older kids, they stopped bullying me. To this day, I still remember their names. Story 59. My mom died in a car accident when I was 14. My dad was driving and was very drunk. A few days later, when my dad came home from the hospital, he sat us down in the living room and made us watch as he burned all of her clothes and pictures. He put any paperwork into her desk drawer, locked it, and dared us to try to get into it. She had told him that if he had anything to do with her death, she would haunt him. He was afraid. Story 60. Back when I was still a Christian, I accidentally stepped on a baby rabbit outside and killed it. It completely exploded under my foot. That was my first time seeing internal organs outside of a body, and I thought God would be angry with me. In retrospect, I may have done that rabbit a favor. The rest of that litter died from parasites, and its stomach was severely bloated with worms. Wild rabbits do not receive medical treatment for these issues, and I believe a quick death was likely more humane than a slow, painful one. At least, that is how I find solace all these years later. Story 61. Can I share my entire childhood? Or is that too much? The one thing that truly breaks my heart is the fact that I was raised alone in the middle of nowhere. Every other child at school had neighborhood friends and places to go. They had talks of visiting aunts, uncles, or grandparents regularly. They had lives full of vibrant family, joy, and fun. Even the ones who faced troubles had people to turn to run away to, or to find solace with. Then I look at myself. I see the sad little girl alone in her room with nothing but imagination and the relentless push from my parents to study, study, study as if nothing else mattered. I think of the only child whose nearest relative lived thousands of miles away. I recall the lifeless environment of my childhood home that seemed devoid of any vitality other than myself. I remember the long stretch of miles that my little legs would have had to run to find a familiar face away from home. It breaks my heart that my childhood was just that. A lifeless push toward growing up, where every good thing was an empty platitude meant to fill my heart in place of the constant warmth and joy that every other child experienced. Story 62. America bombed my city, and I was torn from everyone I knew to a place where I didn't speak the language. Turned out okay, but looking back, it was a significant mistake early in my life. Story 63. I had a babysitter who loved adopting animals, breeding them, and then giving them away as gifts. One day, she had too many kittens and needed to get rid of one. We drove to a wooded area, and she made me, a 10-year-old, leave the kitten by the side of the road. I knew this was a death sentence. I was an accomplice. When the tires spun out, deafening the roadside feline, I realized my babysitter was cruel. 4 years later, she had a nervous breakdown related to her religious beliefs and was committed to the local behavioral health unit for 6 months. Story 64. My parents didn't believe me, and I still am not sure if they do. I don't even think they like me very much. I feel like they say they love me out of obligation, and I'm too afraid to confront anyone. Instead, I moved far away. Story 65. My mom died suddenly when I was 13. What I believed was safe and secure no longer was. That was 35 years ago, and I still have an ache in my soul. Some days it's far away. Other days it is right at the forefront of my consciousness. Story 66. How much I was affected by childhood sexual abuse. I experienced a lot of hypersexuality and repulsion on and off as a child, and I never really questioned how unnatural it was for me to develop those habits at such a young age. Learning years later how much damage that does to a developing mind really impacted me. It's as if I wasn't able to comprehend why I was always so angry or restless until then. Story 67. I didn't know what to get my dad's mother for Christmas when I was around 7 years old. I bought some yarn, and my other grandmother crocheted something for her. However, she didn't put my name on the tag, so my dad's mom didn't know it was from me. When she mentioned not receiving anything from me for Christmas, I just hung my head. I never said anything. That was over 60 years ago. Story 68. Talking with my girlfriend of 13 years, I realized that I missed out on many childhood experiences. I never went to the beach, amusement parks, or had significant friend events and sleepovers that included more than 1 or 2 people. I didn't visit zoos or see animals, despite being a kid obsessed with them. I also missed out on museums, dinosaur bones, and cool displays. I never went to an aquarium. I didn't have the gaming consoles that others had, so I couldn't play party games with my friends. I hadn't tried cheesecake or a variety of other foods. For me, the peak of food was peanut butter fluff sandwiches, canned tuna, pickles, plain salads with ranch dressing and watermelon. I never had a stable home or an easy, carefree time. I spent much of my time drawing or playing the older video games I had bought from a local game reselling shop, specifically a GameCube, but that was quite lonely in hindsight. During my childhood, I didn't have adult responsibilities, but being the older sibling meant I had to help maintain the household and keep the peace. I had some friends, but never close enough to celebrate a full birthday party or go on a group trip. I lived with my grandmother, who disliked me and called me a devil child, while my little sister was considered an angel. We also lost our childhood home in a tragic way, and when we moved, I would run away from school and break into my old house to stay there for a while. We left in such a hurry that much of our belongings were still there. The home was foreclosed. The first time I experienced any of those good things was when I met my girlfriend and moved in with her at 18. She and her mother showed me so much. I've still never been to the beach, a museum, or any park other than Hershey Park, but I got to experience so much because of them. I have never been more grateful for that period of my life. Before meeting them, my existence felt bleak, and I didn't realize it until I saw what normal kids got to do. The challenges I faced were even more significant than what I have mentioned, including being pulled from school for a month at 13 for mental health training, a choice I made because I was suicidal. I just don't want to be more long-winded than I already have been. Story 69. So buckle up, it's going to be a long ride. I grew up in an Italian Catholic family and went to church every Sunday. My grandma made me say my prayers before going to sleep and told me to believe in God. And I did. We had a cat, and at some point she had kittens, but there must have been something wrong with them because they all died one by one until only one remained. I must have been 5 at the time. My grandma always told me not to touch the bottle of holy water we had at home because it was holy. It could perform miracles and was a sacred thing. I thought that bathing the kitten in holy water would save him, right? He needed a miracle to survive, and the water performed miracles, right? So I bathed the kitten in holy water and prayed with all the purity and belief of a 5-year-old who really thinks a miracle is going to happen. What's more innocent and pure than a child praying for a kitten to live? Obviously, it didn't work, and the kitten passed away. I remember burying him under a bush in our garden and realizing right then and there that it was all fake. Not to sound dramatic, but I really think I lost my innocence that day. I certainly stopped believing. Story 70. Being taken to live in a psychiatric ward because I was acting out at home and in school, as the domestic violence and abuse in my home worsened, happened when I was 8. Story 71. My mother was killed when I was 8. I moved to the United States for a better life, but I was molested until I was 13. I had to run away at 14 because I couldn't take it anymore. I had no childhood. Story 72. Knowing that I will never be able to spend holidays at my grandfather's on my mother's side again. He took his own life. Story 73. Seeing so much inequality, I remember the disparity between my stepsister and me. Her family could afford expensive sports, while we had only a black and white television with no more than 4 channels. This situation hurt me, especially when I felt inadequate. Story 74. Finding the heroin that my mom hid in one of my stuffed animals. That way, social services wouldn't find it because who hides drugs in their daughter's room? I was 7. Story 75. Crying at kindergarten graduation because my mother didn't love me. I remember seeing the other kids and how happy their families were for them, with nice presents and special candies. I just recall a brief greeting and farewell. Then we had to leave. I had only a single Scooby-Doo fruit snack. Then the dread settled over me that my mother did not love me and that my achievements did not matter. Story 76. Meet Joe Black. Why did my mom show me that when I was 13? I was sobbing. By the way, everyone's comments are making me so sad. Story 77. Throughout school, I never had any real friends, and everyone made fun of me behind my back. The other day, I spoke with a friend from school, and she told me about how they met after school, celebrated birthdays, and many other things as if I would have been there when I was never invited. When I was walking home at 6 or 7 years old, my classmates would play together as if I didn't exist. Now I understand why, when I invited them to my birthday, they either didn't come or played together without me. Story 78. I remember sitting in aftercare and lunch every day, crying quietly for my mom. One of the cafeteria staff tapped my shoulder and gave me an ice cream. I often think about that kindness, and that lady will never know how much it meant to me. I was in kindergarten then, and I'm 32 now, but I still remember. Story 79. Discovering that Santa, the Tooth Fairy, the Easter Bunny, and God were all imaginary can be shocking. Why do parents feel the need to deceive their children? Story 80. My heart would skip each time my father got home. He beat me all the time, even for unnecessary reasons. He used electric wires, shoes, fists, and sometimes belts too. I was a very skinny child with what I understand now as anxiety and depression. I will be 30 on May 23rd, but each time I think of the things he did to me, I resent him more. My mother tells me to forgive him and forget, but it's not that simple for me. As an adult, I have anger issues, am short-tempered, and find it hard to make friends. I am typing this while crying. Story 81. The accusation from my brother that I abandoned him when he needed me most affected me deeply. My mother convinced him that I wanted to leave the family and that it was his fault because of his challenges and learning disability. The truth was I was in trouble for truancy due to missed school and I got sick. I missed school because my absences were reported. She wanted to save the absences for times they might be needed. I was too old and defiant to be beaten into submission anymore, so the police were called. My father was a police officer. I ended up with an obstruction charge. I returned to help after serving my sentence, but she tried to have my probation violated and my curfew enforced. I graduated high school at 16 and was taking college classes, deliberately scheduling myself for both morning and evening. The police referred the matter to probation, and probation sent it to the judge. The judge sent me to social services for placement. My brother eventually learned the truth, but I often felt guilty about living in a relatively safer environment while the stress shifted to him. We are close, but if I am being honest, I will always wonder if I should have complied more to spare him instead of indulging in my ability to withstand or rebel. Story 82. I had made great friends in my community, but they ghosted me after we started growing up. There were no meetups and no connection, and they all became very egotistic. Story 83. When I was 6 years old, a stray, huge German shepherd tried to attack me, and I kicked it in the face. It sent the dog into a bush, and it ran away whimpering. Being a latchkey kid was not fun. Story 84. As I got older, I realized that I didn't have the support I needed as a child. I struggled with anxiety, which affected me significantly, but I had to figure things out on my own. It took me years to learn how to manage it. However, if I ever have children, I know exactly how to support them. Story 85. The friend I grew up with and imagined having by my side my whole life. We grew apart after attending different high schools. She became depressed and blamed me for making new friends, eventually ending our friendship as if I had been a toxic influence all those years. I have questioned and hated myself for that. I actually started believing I had been a bad friend. But in the end, we were just growing apart, and she needed a reason to end the friendship for her own mental health instead of being honest about it. Story 86. I received a call from my dad, who had been incarcerated for most of my life, saying he would pick me up. I got fully dressed and waited until sundown, wondering when he would arrive, unaware that he wouldn't be coming at all. Now, I still feel irrationally upset when people cancel on me without any prior notice. Story 87. The relationship I have with my mom has been complicated. She used to blame the fact that I liked my dad more than her on my childhood experience of being touched inappropriately by a man, suggesting that it somehow made me prefer men over women. I am not sure how that logic works. She is also a therapist. Story 88. The people I loved most were right there, slipping away. By the time I became an adult and could truly appreciate them, they were long gone. I wish I could see them just one more time for a cup of coffee and meet them as an adult. Story 89. When I was 9, my parents made me skip a grade, and I had to change schools. This began 8 years of bullying. I could write down what I remember, but I fear it would trigger my severe depression. Story 90. My great-grandmother commented on my weight in front of my entire family when I was 8 years old. This resulted in several eating disorders from the age of 10 through my entire 20s. Now at 35, I am at a healthy weight, which I have maintained my whole life, and it still affects me. Story 91. In 5th grade, I never had any friends and barely talked to anyone. I only had 3 people to rely on, one of whom was my cousin. I let 2 of those people meet, and eventually, they grew closer and began talking to each other, while I gradually faded into the background. The other girl cut ties with me for reasons I still do not understand. You cannot imagine the heartbreak I felt when I realized I was alone at such a young age. Now, it still hurts a bit every time I find myself alone in a room full of people. Story 92. The terrible scandals between my father and mother, along with the realization that I couldn't protect my mother, were overwhelming. The death of my dog, who was poisoned for fun, was devastating. My grandmother developed Alzheimer's disease and stopped remembering me, even though I was older and in high school by then. She had wanted to see my wedding. Story 93. When I was a sophomore in college, I hinted to my mom that I would really like a bike to get around at school. I was also taking my first astronomy class that year and frequently shared what I was learning. My mom got me a telescope for Christmas, and my reaction, because it wasn't a bike, still shames me to this day. Story 94. I got home from school and found my dad on his knees crying. He had to have our cat put down because she was suffering. He loved that cat more than life itself. It breaks my heart even more right now because, 15 years later, we are about to have to do the same thing with another kitten, and I know it's going to absolutely break him. Story 95. Artax is sinking into the swamp of sadness. Story 96. Saying goodbye to my cat Othello was my first experience with losing a pet. He was a beautiful black Persian that my parents got in Germany while my dad was stationed there. When I came into the picture, he was my best buddy. The day he was euthanized due to old age, he was lying under the sink in my bathroom, so I went in to say goodbye. I lay down next to him, and he put his paw on my face as if to say, "You'll be all right." I lost it. Not a day goes by that I don't think of my old friend. Story 97. We were moving, and my mom gave my cat away. Technically, my cat's 2-year-old kitten, but that kitten was my buddy, my pal, my shadow. I still miss Sylvester 40 years later. I do know she was well taken care of and had a good life, but she was my best friend. Story 98. When I was 8, there was a girl in my class who no one liked. She was always dirty and disruptive and smelled like cigarette smoke. For her birthday, she invited everyone in the class. I didn't want to go, but my mom forced me to. We didn't have a lot of money, but my mom made me get her the nicest present we could afford. Her house was a rundown trailer in a dangerous part of town. The entire place smelled of cigarette smoke. Her parents were loud and extremely mean to her, and I was the only kid who showed up. Took me years to realize why my mom made me go, but I understand it now. It wasn't that girl's fault that she was dirty and disliked. She literally had no control over it. She wasn't a bad person at all. She just came from a rough place, and at 8 years old, I wasn't able to understand that. I'm now really grateful my mom understood and made me go to that party. I wish I had understood more at the time, had not fought my mom on it, and had been nicer to that girl. She deserved it. Story 99. My dad was in the Royal Air Force and was stationed away for about 6 months. He gave me a hug and asked if I would look after the family car. I took it too literally and spent the entire night watching the car to make sure it was safe for him. It hurt to say goodbye, but his return made it all worthwhile. A big, tight hug. Story 100. Losing the grandfather who raised you at the age of 11 is devastating. I was holding his cold, lifeless hand in the emergency room, and it was the worst day of my life. He survived 7 strokes, and this was his last. Everyone experiences their first encounter with death, and losing a close family member is incredibly heartbreaking. Story 101. My mom shattered my dad's heart when she left him for understandable reasons. To this day, he can barely hold a conversation with her, while he talks to my difficult ex-stepmother as if it's a walk in the park. Took me a while to understand why. I believe that if they could have worked it out, they would be much happier today. My mom has remarried to a man who is not great. Story 102. How I felt when my parents first divorced was filled with turmoil. I never felt at home and was always packing a bag to go to my other house. Story 103. My parents got divorced when I was 6. I understand it now, but it was traumatic for me. Both of them brought their own challenging family backgrounds into the marriage. I felt like I lost my identity. I still exhibit behaviors related to this almost 50 years later. Therapy and grief recovery have been helpful. Story 104. Metroid Fusion features the Spider Boss. It is a 3-stage boss battle. I struggled against it for a long time, and I will never forget that experience. Story 105. A primary school classmate's father completed suicide by drinking liquid Drano. As each of the kids came home from school at different times, they saw their father in worse and worse condition. Story 106. My sister deleted all my saved files on my PlayStation 2 memory card after an argument we had. It completely shattered my reality that all that time and effort playing just vanished. Story 107. An ex-boyfriend and his grandfather were both disgusted. He used to pick up high school boys, molest or assault them, and drop them off again. He eventually stopped because his son became a well-known high school football player, and he figured someone might connect them. Story 108. I had a strange dream about a week after my grandmother passed away. In the dream, my current dream just stopped, and I was shown playing on the television in the spare bedroom where I always slept when visiting her and my grandfather over the summer. I heard my grandma call me from the other room, so I got out of bed and went to the dining room where she was. I don't remember exactly what she said, but we hugged tightly, and as we did, she faded away in my arms. I collapsed to the floor, shocked, and I woke up hugging myself. I don't know exactly what this was, but it felt like my grandmother came into my dream to comfort me one last time. Story 109. I lost my grandpa at the age of 9. He was my best friend. I miss him every day, and I am 47 years old. If heaven is real, and I truly hope it is, he is the first person I want to see. Story 110. I was at a park with my family and a neighbor's family. My friend bumped her head and bit her lip pretty hard. She ran behind the bathroom building to quietly cry about it. When her mom found her, my mom looked down at me and said, "Why can't you cry like that? You had children with a loud country person, ma'am. Why you expected elegant, quiet children is beyond me." Story 111. The only time my dad ever talked about what he went through in Vietnam, he was a drunk and abusive man. Understanding that his behavior stemmed from deep trauma and hurt really affected me. I was 13 and just wanted to hate him, but I couldn't. Story 112. The image of my dog getting hit by a car in front of my home and the people stopping in a blacked-out Jeep for 2 seconds before speeding off. Story 113. My parents had their identities stolen in the late 1980s, and we lost everything, including our house. We went from living in a suburban neighborhood to living not far from public housing. I had neighbors who were murdered in their own homes. My life was permanently changed. I wasn't allowed to have any kind of life until I turned 18 and went to college. Story 114. My old nursery and childhood room, which my parents had painted before I was born, was repainted by renovators after they put the house up for sale. Story 115. I collected tadpoles from a local well in my grandparents' village during my visits. The local children broke the jar I used to collect them and stepped on all the tadpoles. Story 116. My mom lied to us about my dad's side of the family since birth. Now I'm sure the truth lies somewhere in the middle. No one is innocent in this. I believed in her and her words so much that it wasn't until my late 20s or early 30s that I noticed. By then, my grandmother was gone. I've tried to connect with that side, but it's too late now. I'll never forgive her for that. Story 117. I live on a housing estate in the United Kingdom and have lived here my whole life. I was best friends with a girl 2 doors down. She was the youngest of 3 girls with an older brother who I will call Jason. Jason was always really cool and liked good music. He was around 4 years older than us, and he hated the fact that I was such a massive fan of Madonna. When I was 12, I made her my whole personality. He lent me the Joshua Tree album by U2 and told me to go listen to some proper music. Kept it. During the course of secondary school, my best friend and I got separated at school and made different friends. We didn't really bother with each other much anymore. We'd always talk when we crossed paths. But by the time I was 15, I had a boyfriend and spent all my time with him. I came home one day, and my mom said that Jason's dad had been out knocking on doors looking for him as he was missing. He had gone out and not come back for a few days. He would have been around 19 then, and I think everyone just assumed he was with friends or maybe a girlfriend. A few days went by, and obviously there were things we didn't know as the police were looking for him. After a few more days, his dad had gone actively searching for him. There are woods and natural land around us. His dad decided to search all the isolated spots. My boyfriend and I had been at his place all day, and when I got home around 6, my mom told me that Jason's dad had found him. He had taken his own life at the quarry at the end of the estate. I remember just turning around and going straight to my friend's house to see her. I didn't know what I was going to say, but I just needed to see her. She opened the door and crumpled into my arms. She cried and tried to talk, saying she was expecting Jason to walk in any minute and say it was all a joke. She stood there pulling on her jumper, twisting it and rolling it. I had never seen such raw distress. I stayed for a while. She didn't want to go inside the house, so we stayed in her garden. I can't remember much after that. I went home and everything was a blur. My heart shatters every time I think of her and her poor family. It was 31 years ago. Her dad passed away around 5 years ago. My friend got married and has a wonderful family. We still see each other every so often. I still see that girl rocking and crying, twisting her jumper every time I see her. I still have the Joshua Tree album. I offered it back to her after the funeral and she said she didn't want it. It was too painful, but I've always kept it. And it's here if she ever changes her mind. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.